The first time I heard a grown man say, "Step off your own land, or I'll put you down," my brain did this weird, quiet thing, like it didn't want to believe the words belonged in the same sentence as my wife's name and my kids' laughter. But then I saw the pistol in his hand, saw the way his finger sat too comfortably near the trigger, and everything in me snapped into that cold, measured place I promised myself I'd never need again. I didn't yell, I didn't posture, I didn't try to be a hero. I just moved, the way you move when you've been trained to count seconds like they're money. I put my family behind cover, I made him show his hands, and when he raised that gun toward my back door like he was about to make my home a headline, I ended it before he could. Not with anger, not with panic, with precision. And the part that still messes with me is, if you'd met me before that night, you would have sworn I was the last guy on earth to do any of it. Because I'm the easy one, the quiet veteran who smiles at the feed store cashier and helps neighbors haul hay. The guy people assume they can push around because he'd rather swallow a problem than start one. And that's exactly what those HOA people counted on. They thought my calm meant weakness, and they were dead wrong. A couple months earlier, none of this existed in my head. My wife, Natalie, and I had just bought a little spread outside a town called Red Willow, Oklahoma. Not a fancy ranch, more like a patched-together dream with a 2-story farmhouse, a weathered barn, and enough open sky to make you feel like your chest can finally expand again. After the Army, I didn't want noise, I didn't want drama, and I definitely didn't want some board of strangers telling my kids where they could park a bike. Our son, Mason, was 9 and built like a question mark with endless energy. Our daughter, Evie, was 6 and could turn any stick into a wand. We had a mutt named Diesel who acted like he was personally responsible for protecting the entire county. Those first weeks were pure peace, corny movie peace. Natalie baking cornbread like her grandma taught her, Mason begging for a treehouse, Evie naming every chicken like it was a Disney cast list. At night we'd sit on the porch while the sunset did its whole orange and purple show, and Natalie would lean into my shoulder and say, "Happy, Cole?" And I'd say, "Yeah," and I meant it. Then the letters started. Plain white envelope, no logo, no return address, just stiff black text. Notice of noncompliance. Remove unauthorized livestock within 14 days. I actually laughed, like full-on laughed, because we had 4 chickens and 1 old rescue horse that Natalie adored, and we weren't even in a subdivision. The second letter showed up a week later, meaner tone, bigger threats. The third letter had a little line at the bottom in marker. "We know where your kids play." That's when the laughter died, and that old familiar tightness crawled back up my spine. The same tightness I used to feel before a patrol when the air went too still. I called the number printed on the letter and got a woman who sounded like she'd never smiled at anyone in her life. She told me, with absolute confidence, that because our driveway connected to the same county access road used by Stonegate Trails, the manicured development a mile down the highway, we were now within the expanded covenant overlay and subject to their community enforcement authority. I said, "Ma'am, that's not a thing," and she said, "It's a thing when we say it is," then hung up on me like I was a telemarketer. And that's when I realized this wasn't a mix-up. This was a play. It got petty fast, then it got dark. One afternoon, Mason ran in yelling that a man was taking pictures of our barn. I walked out and found this short, soft-bodied guy in a polo and khakis, sweating like he'd never done real work, holding a phone up like he was documenting a crime scene. He looked at me and smirked, not a nervous smirk, a smug one. "Compliance inspection," he said, like he was proud of the words. I told him he was trespassing. He didn't move. He just glanced over my shoulder toward the porch where Natalie had stepped out, Evie tucked behind her leg, and he said, "Real shame when folks make things harder than they need to be." Then he lifted his phone and snapped a picture of my truck plate like he was collecting souvenirs. That night we found neon notices taped to our gate, fines, violations, threats, all typed up pretty. The next morning, Evie found her favorite doll in the flower bed under her window with the head twisted off. Mason found a crude drawing on his treehouse rail, a stick figure hanging from a rope, painted in red. And I hate admitting this, but my first reaction wasn't rage. It was that old, humiliating feeling of being targeted, of being judged as the guy who won't do anything about it. Because growing up, I was always the kid people tested, the kid bullies prodded to see if he'd snap. Later, In the army, I learned control, how to be calm when everything is loud. And somehow, back home, that same calm made people think I could be cornered. I hired a local attorney, a tough little man named Frank Dalka, who took one look at our deed and laughed. "Cole, you're not in their HOA," he said, tapping the paper. "Not even close." Then his face turned serious. But being right on paper doesn't stop dirty people from playing dirty. He told me the name that kept popping up behind these community groups, a development outfit called Blackridge Holdings. "They buy influence," Frank said. "They squeeze families until somebody sells cheap, or they manufacture a problem that makes the county step in." I wanted to believe he was exaggerating. I didn't get to. The intimidation shifted from creepy to strategic. We came home one day to a cheap for sale sign hammered into our yard with foreclosure pending scrawled across it, and Mason cried like the ground was falling away. Then we started getting texts from blocked numbers, little things that felt like someone whispering in your ear in a dark room. "Nice treehouse. Kids look cute from the road." I didn't call the sheriff at first, and I'm not proud of that, but I didn't want to be the paranoid vet everybody laughs at. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm scared. I got practical. I reinforced the back door, added motion lights, installed cameras, and started walking the property line at night with Diesel. Natalie hated it. "We moved here for peace," she whispered one night, and I whispered back, "I know." Then the power went out. Not a storm, not a blown fuse. The breaker panel was ripped open like someone had attacked it with tools, wires hanging loose. Tire tracks cut through the grass near our back gate. They'd been on our land. Close. And something inside me clicked into that cold focus again, not because I wanted a fight, but because I could feel one coming. 2 nights later, well after midnight, Diesel woke us with a low growl that didn't sound like him. Then came a metallic clang from the direction of the barn. Not wind, not animals. Purposeful. I grabbed a flashlight and my old hunting rifle, and I told Natalie, "Get the kids to the safe room." We didn't have a fancy bunker, just a reinforced storage space in the basement with a solid core door and a landline. Natalie didn't argue. She moved like a mom whose fear turns into speed. While she got Mason and Evie downstairs, I slipped out the back and moved along the tree line, staying low, using shadows like they were a friend. I saw 3 figures near the barn. One messing with the padlock, one watching the yard, and one holding a heavy crowbar like it was nothing. I yelled, "You're trespassing. Leave now. I'm armed." One of them bolted immediately, fast and panicked. The other 2 turned toward the house. And then the guy with the crowbar stepped forward into the moonlight, and I recognized him. The polo guy, the inspector. Only now he wasn't pretending to be polite. "You think you can embarrass me?" he shouted. "You think you can tell Stonegate no?" He started walking toward the back porch like he owned it. And that's when he glanced past me and saw Natalie through the back door window, locking it, trying to keep her hands steady. His face changed. He raised the crowbar and charged the door. That's the moment people love to debate from the comfort of a comment section. What would you do? What should you do? What's reasonable? I can tell you what it felt like. It felt like time got narrow. All the noise disappeared. There was only one fact in the world. A man was about to smash a weapon through my back door with my wife and kids behind it. I aimed low, not at his head, not at his chest. I fired once. The shot hit his shoulder, spun him, and he dropped the crowbar with a sound that still echoes in my skull. He screamed, not like a tough guy, like a shocked animal. The second man stared for half a second, then ran. Diesel exploded into barking. Natalie screamed my name from behind the door. And then, like the universe wanted to remind me who's really in charge, red and blue lights washed over the pasture as the sheriff's cruisers came tearing up our drive. They cuffed me. Of course they did. Because when deputies arrive at night to a gunshot, they don't have time to sort out the full story first. I did everything slow, hands visible, rifle placed down, palms up. Natalie came out shaking, yelling. He was coming through the door. Mason's face appeared behind her, pale as paper, whispering, "Is Dad going to jail?" And that question hit me harder than the handcuffs. At the station, hours later, Sheriff Lal Benton sat across from me with tired eyes and a tablet in his hands. "Talk me through it," he said. I told him everything, from the first letter to the doll to the breaker panel. He nodded, then slid the tablet toward me, and played my camera footage, grainy night vision, but clear enough to show the crowbar raised, the charge, Natalie visible behind the glass, the shot, the retreat. Benton paused the video and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "That's self-defense," he said quietly. Clear as day. He uncuffed me and leaned forward. "But listen to me, Cole. This is bigger than one HOA clown. Somebody's funding this pressure." Then he said the words I didn't want to hear. "They're going to come at you another way." The next way was paperwork. A downtown law firm sent a demand letter claiming I was a violent threat, suing for emotional distress, millions in damages, the whole circus. Frank filed countersuits so fast it made my head spin. Then a week later, somebody tried to burn us out. I came home and smelled smoke near the pasture. Our haystack was on fire, flames rolling toward the stable wall. Natalie and I fought it with shovels and hoses until the fire department arrived. The chief sniffed the air and said, "Gasoline," like it was a curse. The sheriff called it attempted arson. And just when I thought we'd reached the ceiling of how evil people can get, we got served with a petition for emergency removal of minor children. They were trying to get CPS involved, claiming our home was unsafe because of firearms, instability, recent violence, all dressed up in clean legal language that made me want to throw up. Natalie read it and made this broken sound, clutching Evie so tight she squeaked. Mason started packing a backpack because he thought strangers were coming to take him. And in that moment, I realized the real weapon wasn't the crowbar or the gun. It was the system turned sideways. We went to court. Stonegate's attorney painted me like a stereotype, volatile veteran, paranoid, dangerous. He showed pictures of our scorched stable and tried to make it look like I caused the fire. He talked about fear in the community, like my kids were contagious. Then Frank stood up and laid out facts, deeds, surveys, the sheriff's report, the footage of the crowbar charge, the arson finding. Natalie testified with a voice that shook but didn't break. "We moved here to be left alone," she told the judge. "They followed us here. When I took the stand, I didn't try to sound heroic. I told the truth. I don't want conflict," I said. "I want my kids to sleep without nightmares. I fired because a man was attacking my back door with my wife behind it. If I'm guilty of anything, it's refusing to be bullied out of my home." The judge listened, face unreadable, then denied the petition. No removal, no CPS emergency action. And she granted a restraining order against the HOA, its officers, and known agents, including the polo guy. Natalie cried so hard she laughed through it. I held her like we were both learning how to breathe again. On paper, that was the win. And it felt good, I won't lie. We took the kids for ice cream. Let them be kids for an hour. But victories can be loud and still feel fragile. A few days later, Mason pointed at the sky and asked why a tiny helicopter was hovering near the tree line. It was a drone, just outside our boundary, legal enough to be annoying, close enough to be a message. And the next morning, I found bright survey tape tied to metal stakes hammered into my south pasture. The tape had a code stamped on it I'd never seen before. Frank dug and called me that night, voice tight. "Cole, that's Blackridge," he said. "It's a holding company behind a stack of other companies. Someone's marking land. Yours. So here's where I leave you, because this is the part people argue about the most. If you're in my shoes, do you keep trusting paper and courts, or do you accept that some people treat laws like speed bumps? Was I right to fire that shot to protect my wife, or did I cross a line that never should be crossed, even when someone brings a weapon to your door? And what about the way they tried to paint me, not as a father, but as a dangerous veteran? Is that bias real, or am I seeing ghosts? I want you to say it out loud in the comments, because silence is what predators count on. Tell me where you stand on self-defense, HOA overreach, and weaponizing the system against families. And if you've ever been underestimated, bullied, or treated like you don't deserve peace, share what happened and how you handled it. If this story hit you, like, subscribe, and send it to someone with family living out in the country. Because the truth is, sometimes the threat doesn't show up wearing a mask. Sometimes it shows up with a clipboard, a polo, and a smile that says they think you'll stay quiet.